Hello, I'm Hannah, and this is Hannah's Books. Last week I posted an original tag, the literary dinner party tag, and invited several people to join me. One of those people was my spouse David, and I'm thrilled that he has agreed to have a little cocktail party with me this afternoon to answer these questions. So here it is. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
Ready to do the literary dinner party tag?
I hope so.
Great. I'll start with the questions. Number one is, when you're at a dinner party, do you ask people what they're currently reading? Or have you gotten good recommendations?
When I'm at a dinner party, I don't tend to have great things to say. I'm not very good at small talk, as you well know. But I have found that when I'm at conferences and we go out to dinner afterwards and they're really interesting people who I've just heard say really interesting things, this often is a good question to get us off of work. And so I do use this question in that setting. Don't always get books that I've read, but occasionally do. And right before the pandemic started, actually, I was at a breakfast, so it wasn't a dinner party. But somebody recommended The Book of Joy, which is by the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu and somebody Adams, who was a filmmaker who actually filmed the meeting of these two great thinkers. And the book is really an account of their discussions on the meaning of happiness and joy in the well-being of humanity. And I was especially impressed with just the way of being of the Dalai Lama. I know many people feel that way, but it was just a lovely encapsulation of what being a good person and finding meaning through caring for others. So, good tip from a breakfast dinner party discussion, book discussion.
So what authors, living or dead, would you invite to a dinner party?
Authors. I think travel writers would be fun to meet. And so one of our favorite books that I listened to for the first time with you on audiobook was by Frances Mays, Under the Tuscan Sun. Just a wonderful exploration of her life and the rebuilding of a house, but a lot about food too. And then there's Peter Mays. It's Peter Mays. From My Life in Provence, which is similar, but he's got a different style, but still explores food and meeting new people. So the two of them, and then maybe
it'll be a lot of fun to put them together.
Yeah, just to hear now, of course, I'd rather they invite me to a dinner party at their house, but if I couldn't, having them would be nice. So very different sort of second dinner party if I can have with authors. I think I naturally thought I would talk about novelists because that's what I read the most of, but actually the people I want to sit down to dinner with are people who've written books that have really moved me that I want to bring together. And right now, the topic that's on my mind, I'd love to bring together Atul Gawande, who wrote the book on being mortal, which I read right after my father died and actually got me interested in palliative care. And a surgeon, actually, Paul Kalanithi, who died of lung cancer and journaled his experience of going from being a physician to being a patient and living and dying with cancer. And then Marion Coutts, who's an artist who wrote a memoir, The Iceberg, about her husband and their family's journey to his death from glioblastoma, which is the cancer I have. And then to round out the table, I want to invite Brené Brown, who's writes a social worker, PhD, does research on vulnerability and courage and shame. Her new work is more about leadership, and I'm actually fascinated by that too, but the original of just on how do we make connections, I think they all would have really interesting things to say and to talk about, and things I'd like to talk about around health and medicine and dying and finding meaning. So a very different kind of dinner party, but it's one I'd like to have.
That makes sense. So the third question is, which characters would you like to invite?
Well, having already admitted that I never know what to say at a dinner party unless I'm doing the introvert thing of the topic that I really know and love about, I want to have a dinner party with all of the people who know how to have dinner parties. And so I'll start with Cyrano de Bergerac from Cyrano. I'll add Alexander Rostov from A Gentleman in Moscow, one of my favorite fun reads of the last 2 years.
Which I'm thinking about reading over Christmas break.
One of the few I've read that you haven't, so I hope you enjoy it even half as much as I did. And then Arthur Less, a recent book. But the book is called Less. So just this book with 4 men that Steve would have called useful. I think
Steve Donahue.
Yes, I'm sorry. I watched his video, and he called himself useful at a dinner party. And these are all useful people, and I probably should divide them among many dinner parties, but I just want to have one big learning experience and just laugh and smile and just have a wonderful, wonderful
So explain
time.
what he means by useful.
These are the people who know how to talk to anybody and keep a conversation moving and know the etiquette and make people feel comfortable and ask interesting questions and make dinner parties work. So,
Spark. Yeah. Okay.
Wait, though. I just realized something too. When I was thinking about this one, I realized that 2 of my favorite literary characters, who I absolutely do not want to have a dinner party with, who I might want to meet, but not at a dinner party, are Uwe from A Man Called Uwe, or Ove, and Olive Kitteridge, which is another book you haven't read yet that is on your TBR list that I love. Not the people that I think would make good dinner party guests.
You would at least need to add one of the
Useful people.
Okay, have you ever wanted to invite an historical figure after reading a biography or autobiography?
Well, I sort of just did that a little bit in the memoir category, but the one that I really did, and since we're playing fantasy, I'll just say that after listening and reading of my father, Dreams of My Father, Barack Obama's earlier novel, his idealism, and he continues it in The Audacity of Hope. I think so. Pre him becoming president, what his ideals were, both of those memoirs just were like, I want to have dinner with this person. I want to spend time in their presence. Yeah, what a thinker. Really inspiring. And I'd be happy to invite Michelle too, because she's also. I haven't read on Becoming yet, but I would love to have dinner with the 2 of them.
Sounds perfect.
Okay.
What would you serve at one of these parties from questions 2, 3, or 4?
Well, when I have the party of useful gentlemen, it's definitely champagne. Maybe oysters, maybe sushi. But what I really want, as I said, I think, is to be invited to one of the chef's tables. But if not, I'll have Anthony Bourdain pick who I thought of inviting to the chef's table. Sorry, I don't think I mentioned him. But I'll have him pick a restaurant for us all to go to. That's sort of a dive kind of place, but where there's really good food and you can just spend hours drinking and eating and having them tell stories.
Sounds lovely. All right. What is your favorite meal scene in a book or a screen adaptation of a book?
I mentioned Alexander Rostov from A Gentleman in Moscow, and that whole book really has a theme of his being a gourmand and caring about manners and the way things are done, but especially about food and wine. So there's just scene after scene after scene that I want to go and be part of. That part of why I loved the book. But there's a really special scene that is not the fanciest meal, but it's during a time of war and deprivation where the Count, the chef, and the maitre d' all scheme and do different things to get very hard to find ingredients and then share them together to make the perfect bouillabaisse and share it in the kitchen with a great old bottle of wine that the Count has rescued. And it's just a lovely scene of friendship. So I loved one of my favorite scenes.
Dinner parties aren't the only times people share food and drink. Are there literary scenes you love where characters get together over brunch or afternoon tea or picnics or cocktails or whatever?
So All of the above. I love all of them. And personally, picnics and brunch. But in picnic scenes, I think are two of my favorite in literature. And the first is the picnic scene in A Room with a View, which is probably one of my top 5 books. And we could go on and on about it, but I won't. And the other is from a children's book, Wind in the Willows by Graham Greene. And it's when, in chapter 1, when Mole meets the water rat for the first time and go on a picnic on the river, and they stroll down together. There's first a scene where the picnic basket is introduced, and Ratty very quickly says all the different foods in it. But even more delightful is the scene when they're actually having the picnic on the riverbank, and Mole gets the delight of unpacking all of the little treats. And that's something I like too, that having lots of little special things in a meal. So wonderful, wonderful scene.
It is a great scene.
And in thinking about this, I realized a lot of my favorite food scenes are actually from children's books, kids' books, from picture books and young adult books, through not YA, but earlier books. Food is really important and often described really lovingly. And so on the earliest one is that I remember is Bread and Jam for Francis, I think is the name of the book, but about the young badger who won't eat anything but jam. And in the very last scene, she finally lets her mother pack a special lunch for her, and she takes it out, and she has all these different little things that she puts out, in carrots and celery and an egg, and a little cardboard box of salt. And that just always makes me happy to think about that one.
I think one of my favorites from children's literature is the tea parties, or just having tea every afternoon, as well as in Amazon's, the Arthur Ransom books, which I didn't discover until our son was young.
They get the milk from the neighbor's farm.
Yeah. Okay, name one of your favorite cringeworthy dinner party scenes in a book or adaptation.
By far, the one that just grabbed me and would not let me go, and cringeworthy, you cannot look away, is the entire play, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? I read it when I was in high school. It's what got me into theater, I think, into drama as opposed to musical theater. I don't think I understood half of the layers that were in it, but it is just gripping. And the movie, which I saw many years later, is really, really good too. But the play is just breathtakingly cringeworthy. How you do not want, what you do not want to have happen at a dinner party. So highly recommend if you're looking for cringeworthy.
So I was thinking you might choose the play or book that you've talked about and not known what was.
Well, that's not, thank you. That's not cringeworthy, but dinner party, you're right. There's a short story that I absolutely loved, probably read in high school or college a number of years ago. Have never been able to find it since, that I thought was called something like The Man on My Left or The Man on My Right. And it's the perspective of a fancy dinner party and a woman being seated and dreading the boring conversation that's going to be there. And then at the end discovering how wrong she was about the person that she was disparaging at first. And if any booktubers out there think what this could be, it is not the story called The Dinner Party. That's takes place in India with the cobra and all that. No, not that one. High society, London, New York kind of fancy dinner party. Witty dialogue. I thought it was Dorothy Parker for the longest time, but
that would certainly make sense.
It just sounds like her. It's what reminds me of her. But I've tried looking through and never found it.
So if any of you know,
please.
Okay, so when the pandemic ends, what will you serve at your first dinner party or take to the first potluck you attend?
I look forward to that time. Hopefully it'll be this summer. It would be nice if it was sooner. I don't think it will be. And so if it is summer...
Even if we're sitting outside around, scattered apart.
Yeah, but that's just not going to be the same one. So I'm waiting for that time when we can go and share with people at the dinner party, at a party. And I will walk to the farmer's market without my mask, and I will visit people, and I will buy local goat cheese, and I will buy local peaches, and I will buy local spring lettuces or summer lettuces, something crunchy. And I want to grill the lettuce and maybe if it's a romaine-like thing, and grill the peaches and make a salad with a special vinaigrette.
Sounds phenomenal.
And a bottle of champagne.
Perhaps I'll make a loaf of sourdough bread to go with it.
Sounds perfect.
Okay. And what booktubers or other people would you like to invite or tag this?
Yes. Well, you definitely invited on your original some of my favorite. You've introduced me to BookTube and some favorite people, but I do have a few others. One, in my reading habits, Abe, our son, Abraham, has introduced me to many of my favorite books, including some that I've mentioned here and some that I've mentioned on previous things. So I'd love to invite him to our dinner party, and he's living with us now, so we have many dinner parties with Abe, but I would love to see him. And because Abe has been asking and talking a lot about tiny houses recently, I think by being stuck with his parents, this has inspired him. Matthew at Mayberry
Book Club.
Mayberry Book Club lives in a tiny house, and he was the first booktuber you introduced me to. So I'd love to see his take on this. And the other is Claudia at Spinster's Library, who you've shared on different occasions different of her books, but I absolutely remember that her partner, Bill, joins her for things. So she's one of the other brilliant booktubers who occasionally invites their silly spouse to join them. So I would love to have dinner with them as well. So Bill and Claudia should join in too.
Well, both you and Bill are pretty smart. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much.
Bon appetit.